and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
Well, what's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM. Great show lined up for you today. A lot of football, talking about the AFC South, NFL in general, Top 10 Tuesday. Zack Hicks joining me at 11 o'clock to talk Colts. And that is, of course, where I want to start today. Jonathan Taylor might be the only running back in the NFL worth I wouldn't call it a big contract. Let's call it a bigger contract, because as we know, the value of running backs in the NFL has plummeted over the past couple of seasons. But last year, Jonathan Taylor decided to hold out and, make a little bit of extra money. And he obviously played a big role in the Colts win on Sunday. 23 carries, a reception, 110 rushing yards, that 25-yard, screen, scored 2 touchdowns. He was awesome. Okay, and he needs to continue to be that for the Colts going forward to obviously make things easier on Anthony Richardson. I thought the game against the Bears was the first time that he was properly used. And by that, I more so mean that against the Bears was the first time that it felt like they were consciously trying to get him the football. Only 12 carries against the Packers. That's not enough. Only 16 carries against the Houston Texans. That also isn't enough. This is a guy who needs to continue to be a focal point of the offense so that the Colts can actually have a chance at winning games. And if he continues to play like he did on Sunday, this Colts offense could continue to be pretty good. Here is Colts head coach Shane Steichen yesterday when he was asked about Jonathan Taylor and the performances that he's put together so far this season.
Yeah, I think obviously our offensive line sets the tone for those guys up front, Anthony and JT, but JT's running really good right now. He's seeing it well. He's being patient. He's hitting the holes. Obviously, he hit the home run there, the first touchdown there in a blitz zero look, and it was awesome. We showed it in the team meeting this morning, and the way he was able to press, cut back behind it, and then get front side again. It was big time. So it's good to have him back there, and we go from there.
That was Indianapolis Colts head coach Shane Steichen discussing Jonathan Taylor and the good game that he had on Sunday and just how good he's been throughout the first 3 weeks in general. And before I really get into the nitty-gritty on Jonathan Taylor, I very quickly want to address Shane Steichen. His demeanor after wins and after losses doesn't change. He moves on quickly, and that is a great thing, okay? Because the Colts are going to lose some tough games this year. They're going to win some tough games, and you can't allow one loss to become 2, and you can't allow an emotional win to lead to a loss. So this is one of the other things that I like about Shane Steichen. He appears to not get hung up on wins and losses. He does a great job of moving on. Speaking of moving on, Jonathan Taylor. Now, I am a big believer in not paying running backs. I believe that it is a waste of money because they are incredibly replaceable. And oftentimes, the great running backs in the NFL don't elevate offenses. They do not elevate offenses. Okay, the only running back in the NFL that elevates an offense coming into this season is Christian McCaffrey, and he hasn't played a snap all year long, right? He's been on IR. He's also the highest paid running back in the NFL this year at making, based off of average salary, which is around $19 million for him this season. And he hasn't played a snap. And this is part of my hesitancy to pay running backs. It's the fact that they get hit a lot. Every play that a running back plays, they're probably going to get hit, whether it's turning around and handing them the football or it's them in pass protection, right? Because if you're in pass pro, you got to block somebody, right? And so this is part of the hesitancy. And the other thing is, once again, 99% of running backs in the NFL are replaceable. Look at the New York Giants. Is there really that big of a difference in that New York Giants offense with Saquon Barkley back there the past several years or Devin Singletary in these first few weeks? The difference really isn't that big. Okay, and the difference in the Philadelphia Eagles offense going from DeAndre Swift, who's obviously in Chicago now, to Saquon Barkley, like the leap hasn't really been that big. There's not that noticeable difference. But when it comes to the Colts and when it comes to Jonathan Taylor, I do think that there is a very noticeable difference between Zach Moss in the Colts backfield and Jonathan Taylor in the Colts backfield, which is something that I don't like to admit because I remember last year when Jonathan Taylor held out and he wanted more money and all these things, I was pretty adamant about not paying him because I thought he was replaceable. Now, it's only been 3 games. I could still wind up being right in my initial thoughts to not pay Jonathan Taylor. He could get hurt next week. His production could go down. All these things are possible. But as of right now, he is on an incredibly short list, 2 guys, of highly paid running backs that are actually worth the money that they are being paid. It's him, and even though he's been hurt a lot, it's Christian McCaffrey because the 49ers do not make the Super Bowl last year without Christian McCaffrey. Okay, and even if you're hurt, if you're the reason why your team makes the Super Bowl, I'm going to say that you're worth an average of $19 million a year. Okay, so Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey, as of right now, are the only 2 running backs worth the money that they're being paid. When you look at the highest paid running backs in the NFL, only 5 of them, on average, make 8 figures a year, so $10 million a year or more. It's Christian McCaffrey, who's worth it, Alvin Kamara, who's not, Jonathan Taylor, who is, he's making on average, I think, around $14 million a year, makes him the 3rd highest paid running back in the NFL based on average salary. He's worth every penny of it as of right now. Saquon Barkley is not as good as he is, and Josh Jacobs is not worth the $12 million a year that he's making. The only 2 worth an 8-figure salary are Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey. And hopefully this is something that continues for the Colts and Jonathan Taylor. Hopefully they can keep him healthy. Okay, because the Colts' only shot, if Anthony Richardson continues to play the way that he's been playing, their only shot at making the playoffs is if Jonathan Taylor continues to play well, right? And look, the idea of Colts and the playoffs, 1 and 2 start, all these things feels a little far-fetched, but it's really not because the AFC South is awful. It's terrible. It might be worse than the NFC South, legitimately. Okay, everyone is down on the Jacksonville Jaguars after last night. They've lost 8 straight games that Trevor Lawrence has started, and that is going to be the big conversation today. What do the Jacksonville Jaguars do with Trevor Lawrence? They paid him in the offseason. Everyone's going to talk about that. But do not let the conversation around the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence distract you from the fact that the Tennessee Titans are the worst team in the NFL. They're even worse. The Tennessee Titans are awful. Will Levis is terrible. He has all the bad traits of Anthony Richardson. He commits terrible turnovers, worse than Anthony Richardson does, and there's no upside. He doesn't push the ball down the field with the same success as Anthony Richardson. I don't care that his completion percentage on the year is 68%. It's check down city. He might be the worst starter in the NFL if the Carolina Panthers continue to bench Bryce Young in favor of Andy Dalton, which they're doing once again this week. The Carolina Panthers head coach came out, made the announcement that they're once again going to roll with Andy Dalton because, quote, he gives them the best chance to win. And when I look at the AFC South and I look at the Tennessee Titans, they've got to be frustrated because their defense has actually been pretty solid. They're only allowing 4.7 yards per play. That's tied for 6th best in the NFL. But they're 26th in points per game allowed. And a large part of that is because of what happened against the Bears, where the Bears scored 24 points and they didn't score an offensive touchdown. A large part of why they're giving up so many points is because of these awful Will Levis turnovers. When you look at the Titans, like the defense seems pretty legit. They're 3rd in red zone touchdowns allowed per game, which means when they're allowing teams to get into the red zone, they're holding them to field goals instead of giving up touchdowns. And they're 10th in 3rd down defense. They're doing a good job of getting off the field on third down. But the issue in Tennessee is Will Levis. As long as he's their starter, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Bad turnovers, doesn't push the ball down the field, can't make big plays. And the worst part of this is we have to watch them play Monday Night Football on Monday. And that is not going to be fun. To make it even worse, it's against the Dolphins and probably Skylar Thompson. That might be the worst Monday Night Football game we get all year long. Moving on to the Jags, who got mollywopped last night. They're 0-3, which is not great for me. My prediction that they would win the division looks worse and worse by the day. Trevor Lawrence has lost his last 8 starts, and the worst part of this for the Jacksonville Jaguars is that they are stuck with him. He is tied for being the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL at an average of $55 million a year. But he will not be labeled as the problem. Doug Peterson is going to be the scapegoat down there in Jacksonville, even though if you look at Trevor Lawrence's career, his best years have come under Doug Peterson. And I got to be honest, I don't know if Doug Peterson's the problem. There are a lot of issues in Jacksonville when you look at that roster. Let's start up front. That offensive line, terrible. Terrible. They can't pass protect. Trevor Lawrence was pressured on what felt like every snap last night. They don't run block very well. It's not very good up front for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Defensively, they don't really generate a ton of pressure on the quarterback. Josh Allen had all night, all day to throw yesterday. They don't really have a lockdown corner. They only have one legitimate pass rusher in their own Josh Allen, which is disappointing because 3 years ago they had the number 1 overall pick. They spent it on Travon Walker, who had 10 sacks last year, but you don't really feel his presence. Number 1 overall picks should be better than that. They could have had Aiden Hutchinson, who's been a beast for the Lions really ever since they drafted him. Doug Peterson is going to be the scapegoat in Jacksonville, but he's not their biggest issue. He's not. They've got roster issues all over the place. I like Josh Allen on the defense. I like Terron Armstead. And that's really it when it comes to that Jacksonville Jaguars defense that gave up 47 points last night. But with that being said, they only scored 10. And when your offense only scores 10 points, it falls on the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, who has to be better. The interception he threw last night was terrible, right? Just sailed one. It looked like the Anthony Richardson's second interception from Sunday. He just threw it, ball sailed high, fell in the defender's arms. Like, you can't do that, okay? And when you lose 8 games in a row as a starter, as Trevor Lawrence has done, like, you're going to come under scrutiny, and rightfully so. But here's the thing. The Jaguars have bigger issues outside of Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, okay? But look, here's the good news. If you're a Jacksonville fan for some reason, it's only week 3. You got 14 games left. Okay, you figure out a way to go 9-5. You salvage the season, winning record, yippee, 3 straight winning records. The 3 straight winning seasons for the Jags. Couldn't tell you the last time that happened. So they can salvage it, but let's be honest, that Jacksonville Jaguars team looks terrible, which is semi-good news for the Colts. They're the second best team in the division, which is kind of incredible. And as I was sitting down and I was prepping last night, I was prepared to tell you that the Colts should sweep the Jags and the Titans, but you can't say that the Colts should beat anybody because you never know what Anthony Richardson is going to do. But they're definitely capable of sweeping a bad Titans team and a bad Jacksonville Jaguars team. Look, if there's any year for the Colts to win on the road in Jacksonville, it seems like it's this year because that team is no good. Okay, this division is so bad that the Colts are going to have a chance to make the playoffs, despite starting 0-2, which I know people love to throw out the stat of, most teams don't make the playoffs when they start 0-2, but a lot of those numbers, don't really factor in the fact that there's extra playoff spots now. There's more playoff spots than there were, 4 years ago. So that number is going to change over time just because there's an extra playoff spot in each conference. But even if they start 1-3, even if they lose to the Steelers this week, which is what I think is going to happen, It's all dependent on Jonathan Taylor staying healthy. They can start 1-3 and still have a chance to make the playoffs. Jonathan Taylor has to stay healthy, and Anthony Richardson has to continue to develop as a passer as the year goes on. And then, of course, we have the Houston Texans, the golden child of the NFL, which, that might be fading a little bit after they got crushed on Sunday by the Vikings, 34-7. So I guess by default, we have to say that the Texans are currently the best team in the division through 3 weeks. I don't think they've looked great. They barely beat the Colts in week 1. They won a clunker against the Bears 19-13 in week 2. And then, of course, they got their doors blown off on Sunday by the Vikings. Okay, they have the best quarterback in the division as of right now, so they're probably the best team. I said it before the year started, though. I think they're overrated. They were definitely overrated coming into the season. Okay, this is not a Super Bowl team. This isn't a team that's good enough to even play in the AFC Championship game. They're a good team that might win the division, but they aren't a shoo-in for it like people assume they were to start the year. Okay, CJ Stroud, he can really play. I like D'Amico Ryans, but there's something missing on that team. I don't know what it is, but there's something missing on that Houston Texans roster. And, look, the Colts are 1-2. They still have a chance to win this division. They still have a chance to make the playoffs, even if they lose on Sunday, because that Houston Texans schedule is brutal, and that Colts schedule isn't. Okay, it's a lot of bad quarterbacks, a lot of winnable games. The question is just going to be, can Jonathan Taylor stay healthy, and can Anthony Richardson develop into a solid NFL quarterback? We're 3 weeks into the season now. Colts are 1-2. There are some teams that are 3-0, and let's be honest, of the 5 teams that are 3-0, 2 of them make sense. The Chiefs and the Bills being 3-0 isn't surprising. But the other 3 teams that are 3-0, kind of surprised by it. We're going to talk about those 3 teams that are 3-0, why they're 3-0 when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Monday Night Football last night. I like the two games. I know some people don't. I do, because sometimes you have a stinker like what the Bills and the Jaguars was, and then you just watch the other game, which was awesome. Commanders beating the Bengals 38-33, cashed in on that. It was really, really nice. Great game. No punts. We love that. Love a game with no punts. But after last night, week 3 officially over. The Bills advance to 3-0. They are one of 5 teams that are 3-0. And look, it's not surprising in the slightest that the Chiefs and Bills are 3-0. They continue to dominate the AFC. It feels like we are once again set on this crash course of the Bills and Josh Allen taking on the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. At some point in the playoffs, probably in the AFC Championship game, and we're going to watch the game, and somehow, some way, Patrick Mahomes is going to figure out a way to sneak it out and win by 3 in the final minutes. That feels like where we are once again headed. But they are not the only 2 3-0 teams in the NFL. There are 3 other teams in the NFL that are 3-0, and I am partially surprised by some, completely surprised by another. Let's start with the Seahawks. I got to be honest, not surprised that the Seahawks are 3-0. Before the year started, I was pretty adamant thinking that the Seahawks were going to be a good football team. Okay, but I'm sure there are some people out there that are surprised by this. Geno Smith has been a really solid option at quarterback for the Seahawks. He's played very well to start the season, 75% completion percentage, 260 yards passing a game on average, 3 touchdowns to 3 picks. Isn't great. But when you run the ball as well as Seattle has, and the defense plays as well as Seattle's has, then you can turn the ball over a couple times and still figure out ways to win games. Okay, and what I think is impressive about the Seahawks, the Vikings, and the Steelers all starting 3-0 is they don't have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. They have journeyman Geno Smith, starts in New York with the Jets. Things don't pan out there. He ends up, as Phillip Rivers' backup for a couple years. Then he ends up in Seattle where he's Russell Wilson's backup. He's bounced around. And as he's gotten older, he has gotten better. It's incredible. It's almost like quarterbacks can get better as they get older. Who would have thought of such a crazy concept? Anyway, he's gotten better. And it's really impressive, the fact that they're 3-0 despite having not an elite quarterback. The Vikings, 3-0 with Sam Darnold. What in the world? Everyone wrote him off. The 49ers cut him last year. Look, if Kyle Shanahan gives up on you, then I think that's plenty of reason for everyone else to. But Sam Darnold, he's ended up in Minnesota. He's done a great job as their starter. Okay, the Steelers, they're 3-0 with Justin Fields, who is, no matter how you slice it, terrible in Chicago. Hasn't been much better in the Steelers. We're going to get to them here in a minute, but I want to stick with the Seahawks because you can win games without excellent quarterback play. It's just really difficult. And the backbone of it, something we're going to realize with all 3 of these teams, is the defense. The Pittsburgh Steelers have the best defense in the NFL, but the Seahawks have the second best defense in the NFL. They are number 1 in yards per play allowed at 3.9, which means they aren't giving up a ton of big plays. Okay, they're keeping everything in front. They're coming up. They're making tackles. That 3.9 number is absurdly good. Okay, they are 4th in points per game allowed at only 14.3. This defense for the Seattle Seahawks is nasty. Mike McDonald can coach on that side of the ball, which we all knew if you've kept track of him and during his time in Baltimore. And as long as Geno Smith continues to be solid and he doesn't give games away, and as long as the Seattle Seahawks are capable of running the football, they're going to win a lot of games. This is how you do it. If you don't have, a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson, this is the way forward. Run the football. Okay, control the clock. Don't ask your quarterback to do too much, and you can win football games. The Indianapolis Colts should probably take something out of the Seattle Seahawks playbook in that regard. And then you've got the Vikings. who are, I think, the most surprising team to start 3-0 because people wrote off Sam Darnold, and rightfully so. There were questions about the defense coming into the year. They had a rough offseason. A lot of guys got hurt. Their third-round defensive back that they drafted died in the offseason. Like, it was ugly. It was a really ugly offseason, but Kevin O'Connell, Vikings head coach, has done a great job of helping Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold leads the NFL in touchdown passes with 8, and he's only thrown 2 interceptions. He has helped elevate his play. They went out, they added Aaron Jones in the offseason, who has played incredibly well for them in the backfield. But a lot of the Vikings victories are because of Sam Darnold, right? And his ability to play the quarterback position well, something that people question his ability to do coming into the year. He wasn't supposed to be the starter. He wasn't going to be the starter. It was going to be rookie J.J. McCarthy. He tears his meniscus. Sam Darnold takes full advantage of this opportunity, and he's playing the best football of his career right now, and it's not really close. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Brian Flores, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Right, but he's been part of some drama. Some people don't like him. He sued the NFL. Offseason, Tua Tagovailoa calls him out, says he wasn't a very good coach when he was in Miami. But he's an exceptional defensive coordinator. Was great in New England with Bill Belichick. When he was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, their defense was stout. Offense, not as much, but the defense was. And now he's in Minnesota. They pieced together a defense last year. Brian Flores figured out ways to be successful in some spots. But the offseason, they had some more defensive pieces, and now they're rolling, and they legitimately look like one of the best teams in the NFL. They've been probably the most complete team in the NFL. It's them or the Bills in these first 2 weeks. And that speaks to the coaching that's happening there with Kevin O'Connell and that offense and Sam Darnold and the defense. Brian Flores doing a great job there. So I'm buying the Vikings. I think they're legit. I'm buying the Seahawks. I thought they were good before the year even started. Not sold on the Steelers, though. Okay, and people are freaking out about Pittsburgh and Justin Fields. Oh, Justin Fields, he's so great. Their offense is only averaging 17 points a game. It's not very good. It's not very good at all. And when you watch Justin Fields, he's clearly limited. Clearly limited. He doesn't throw the ball over the middle of the field consistently. And that seems like an issue to me. Like, you have to be able to work every part of the field. And Justin Fields doesn't seem very capable of doing that. Week 1, if you look at his passing chart against the Atlanta Falcons, literally every throw was outside the numbers. He's been a little better in these last 2 weeks, but he's not throwing deep overs. He's throwing little slant routes over the middle. Like, there's just a major lack of offensive punch, right? But I guess that you don't need a great amount of offensive punch when you have this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. This Pittsburgh Steelers defense is the best unit in the NFL. Like, if you lined up every single offensive and defensive unit in the NFL and you picked them, the number 1 pick should be the Pittsburgh Steelers defense because it is hands down the best. It's definitely the best defense, and it's better than the Bills offense or the Chiefs offense. Like, this Steelers defense is nasty. They're fast. They tackle. They're physical. It is a normal Mike Tomlin Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And that is why they've won these games. Once again, their offense, terrible, only averaging 17 points a game. But look, that's all you need, I guess, when you have this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Right. And the reason why I'm not sold on the Steelers, the reason why I'm hesitant to buy into the hype that so many people have bought into with Justin Fields and these guys is I just don't know if an offense led by Justin Fields, Najee Harris, and George Pickens is enough offensive firepower to beat some of the better teams in the NFL. Like, I feel like you need a little bit more of a punch. Like, there has to be something more there. Like, when they need points, what is the thing that they're going to go to? Like, even if you don't like the Colts, even if you have questions about the Colts, when they need points, when they need to put together a good drive, we know We know what they're going to do. They're going to lean on Jonathan Taylor in those spots. And when I look at the Steelers, I don't think that they have that. And they haven't played any great offense yet. They played the Falcons in week 1, who were kind of an interesting team. They played rookie Bo Nix and the Broncos in week 2. And then they played the Chargers last week, whose best wide receiver is Quentin Johnston. So they haven't needed a great amount of offensive firepower. But down the road, when they play the Ravens and they play the Chiefs, right, and they maybe even the Commanders, who haven't punted in the last 2 weeks, when they play those teams, like, the offense is going to have to be more productive. And I just don't think that they have the talents to do that per se. So the Steelers, very interesting team. Very interested to kind of see how they develop. I'm excited to watch them come here to Indianapolis on Sunday. Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts is set to join me at 11. I'm sure we'll talk about that game a little bit. Going to definitely look back and reflect on the Colts win over the Bears. But the Steelers, interesting team. I do think that they'll beat the Colts on Sunday. That's kind of where I'm leaning right now, just because I don't think any of us have faith in this Colts offense. Even though if Anthony Richardson came out and was great against the Steelers, I don't think that would surprise anyone either, just because of his up and down nature. But he's been down these last 2 weeks. He's about to play against the best defense in the NFL. Hard not to like the Steelers this week to start 4-0. And they're going to be 4-0, and everyone's going to go absolutely nuts. 4-0, Justin Fields. Oh, people are going to start throwing parades that have not sold their stock on Justin Fields. But just a quick little reminder. The Eagles started 10-1 last year, started 4-0, and they weren't very good. Okay, record isn't everything. So before we start throwing parades for the Steelers and we start saying that they're one of the better teams in the league, let's just slow down. Let's see a little bit more before we get ahead of ourselves and start to crown teams before they're, worthy of being crowned. Okay, if you want to crown the Bills right now, go right ahead. They look awesome. If you want to crown the Chiefs right now, go ahead. We've got, the past 5 years of Chiefs success. So if you want to crown them, go right ahead. But slow down on the Steelers. I think we need to see a little bit more before we get excited about what they could be and who they are. Because who they are right now is a great defensive team with a lot of question marks on offense. They're only averaging 17 points a game, and that is not going to get it done against the better teams in the NFL. So that's the positive side of the spectrum, teams that have started 3-0. The other side is there's some teams that have surprisingly started 1-2, and of course there's the Bengals who have started 0-3. We're going to look at the other side of the spectrum when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM in the Indianapolis area. Head over to YouTube, subscribe to Indy Sports Ticket. Check out the live stream. Follow me on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith. You can watch the stream there as well. And you should also follow us. You should also follow the station at Ticket 1430 on Twitter for updates on my show and the Dan Dockett Show. Joining me at 11 o'clock, 20 minutes away, Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts set to join me as he does every Tuesday at that time. So just went through the surprise NFL teams that are 3-0. We're going to flip it now. We're going to look at the teams that are 1-2, because there's some teams that are 1-2 that I think people are surprised by. And of course, there are the Bengals, who are 0-3 after last night, 38-33. They lose to the Commanders. The Commanders didn't punt. They scored on every single possession except for one where they ended up having to go into the half. They win 38-33. And the Bengals are really the only surprising team that has started 3-0. The other teams that have gotten off to that rough 0-3 start, I don't think is incredibly surprising. I talked about the Jags earlier. If you wanted to tell me that was a surprising thing, then I would agree with you, considering I picked them to win the AFC South. But, when you look at that team, the Jags, there's just a lot of issues on that roster outside of Trevor Lawrence. Okay, the defense isn't very good. They don't get pressure on the quarterback. The offensive line isn't very good. They don't keep Trevor Lawrence clean. They don't have much of a run game. Like, there's just a lot of issues in Jacksonville. But the Bengals coming into the season, like, people expected this to be a team that potentially made it to the AFC title game, maybe even made it to the Super Bowl. And they've got two horrifically bad losses on their resume. Okay, like, it's not like their three losses are to the Chiefs, the Bills, and the 49ers, or the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. No, their losses are to the New England Patriots in week 1. They lost that game at home. Then they go on the road. They play against the Chiefs. They play an outstanding game. People are kind of relaxing, like, it's the Bengals. They're 0-2, but they've kind of figured things out. Jamar Chase looked better against the Chiefs. They'll be fine. And then Monday Night Football, in front of everyone, they gave up 38 to a rookie quarterback. They only forced 2 incompletions. Jaden Daniels was 21 of 23. They have major issues on the defensive side of the ball. That secondary is terrible. It's awful. And Joe Burrow simply hasn't been good enough to bail them out. The Bengals are a bad football team. Yes, they have Joe Burrow, and the blonde hair's cool, and he'll have frosted tips in a couple weeks, and it'll be all over your Twitter feed and all that great stuff. But they're bad. Their offensive line isn't very good. Zach Moss is their best running back, so he doesn't really relieve any of the pressure off of Joe Burrow. The secondary, the linebackers aren't very good. The secondary can't cover anybody. But hey, they have Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. And those guys get sacks from time to time. You have to have more than that. And the Bengals just don't. They don't have enough. The roster as a whole is terrible. And Joe Burrow hasn't been good enough to overcome the issues on that roster. And what's concerning for them is, at some point here, sooner or later, Joe Burrow's probably going to get hurt. Just kind of waiting on that to happen. So they've got a lot of issues on both sides of the football that they have to figure out before they become a viable football team. Bengals 0-3. Don't think anyone had that on their bingo card. Next, surprising teams that are 1-2. The Dolphins are 1-2. It's because Tua got hurt. Even though, to be fair, they lost a lot in the offseason. I didn't think that they'd be great. Thought that they might go 10-7, but with Tua out, man, if you're running Skylar Thompson out there, you aren't going to win very many football games. Okay. Also, for what it's worth, Tua should probably retire. With that being said, I don't think he will. Okay. None of these guys retired. Dude, guys rarely retired due to health concerns. And look, I get it. You spend your entire life working towards something. It's very hard to hang it up, especially when you're Tua and you just inked a deal for $53.1 million a year. That is not an easy thing to walk away from. But the Dolphins, until Tua comes back, they're going to continue to be a bad football team because that's what they are right now without Tua Tagovailoa. Next, we've got the Ravens. So the Ravens are 1-2. I don't think anyone saw this coming either. Their losses, like they've had, I would argue, probably one of the tougher schedules in the NFL to start the year. They played the Chiefs, lose that one. Great game, great opening game to the season. They lose that one, if Likely gets a foot in, then maybe they win that game, and we aren't concerned about them like we are. But then they go on the road and they lose to the Raiders, which was really weird. That game as a whole was just weird. There's no other way around it. I think that when the season ends, we're going to look back at that game kind of like how we did in 2022 when the Colts beat the Chiefs, and we're going to be like, how did that happen? Right? Like that Raiders win over the Ravens, I think, is going to be the most puzzling game outcome of the year. Right? But here's the thing. I'm not worried about the Ravens. Like some of these teams that are 1-2, like there's legitimate concern over. Like if you're a Dolphins fan, you're concerned about Tua. Okay, if you're the Browns and you're 1-2, you're concerned about Deshaun Watson. When I look at the Ravens, though, I don't have any concerns. Okay, they run the football well. They've got talent on defense. They're starting to kind of figure it out. We saw that against the Dallas Cowboys. I know they almost blew that lead, but I'm not overly worried about them. I am worried though about the Dallas Cowboys because they're 1-2 as well. And roster construction in the NFL is a major topic. It definitely is here in Indianapolis because Chris Ballard makes a lot of questionable decisions. And the Cowboys have done something different than what the Colts have done, right? Like when you look at the Colts and you look at where they've spent their money, it's all in the offensive and defensive line, which isn't the worst strategy in the world because I don't know if you've watched some of these other teams play, but the teams that can't block anybody and the teams that can't generate any sort of pass rush, those teams are terrible. And the Colts can do both of those things, right? So they have a chance to win some games. Look at the Cowboys, though. All their money is wrapped up in three different players. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons. Two great players and a good one. The two great players being CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. Dak's fine. He's a top 10-ish quarterback in the NFL. And look, three players that's just not going to win you games in the NFL. It's not, no matter how great they are. Like when we look at the best teams in the NFL, let's just take the Chiefs because I think everyone would agree that they're one of, if not the best team in the NFL. They have dudes everywhere. Everywhere. Obviously, Mahomes at quarterback, Travis Kelce. I know he's gotten off to a slow start this year, but that's one of the best tight ends ever. Rashee Rice, should he be suspended? Probably. I don't know. Like he's a great young emerging receiver. Right, so that's three great players on offense alone, and then you look at their defense, and it's Chris Jones, and they've got the linebacker Nick Bolton, who's been awesome, and they've got some edge rushers, and they've got good corners. Like they've drafted incredibly well to supplement the guys that they're paying a whole bunch of money. And when you look at the Cowboys, they haven't done that. Okay, they can't run the football. Their offense is entirely reliant upon CeeDee Lamb, which is a major issue. And their front seven outside of Micah Parsons sucks. Okay? We've all watched the Colts these first 3 weeks. And after week 2, you might have said something like the Colts have the worst rush defense in the NFL. That would have been false. The Dallas Cowboys do. The Dallas Cowboys, after 3 weeks of the NFL season, are allowing 186 rushing yards per game. And they're only averaging 73 rushing yards a game themselves. They have the largest differential in rushing yards per game in favor of their team and rushing yards allowed since the Colts in 1950. Okay, they are horrendously bad in the trenches, and I just don't know how they fix it. I think people were at least intrigued by the Cowboys coming into the season, but they're so bad up front on both sides of the ball that they aren't going to beat anybody. The Washington Commanders could legitimately be the best team in the NFC East. I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card coming into this season. This Commanders team hasn't punted in 2 weeks. They haven't punted the last 2 games that they've played, which is absurd. And their defense, it's good, not great. Dan Quinn, I think, does a good job, not a great job. Jaden Daniels continues to look good. And it sucks for me because anytime a young quarterback not named Anthony Richardson plays well, I get a bunch of people tweeting at me and talking to me, which is fine. But here's the thing that we have to remember. Jaden Daniels played 6 years of college football. Got a ton of reps in college between Arizona State and LSU. He's also 3 years older than Anthony Richardson. He should be better than him right now. He's gotten more reps. He's older. He's seen more. Okay, so whenever we watch these guys play, like, we have to keep that in mind. Bo Nix has played a significantly higher amount of football than Anthony Richardson has. All right, so when we watch these young quarterbacks, that is the thing that we have to keep in mind. I've got Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts joining me here in about 10 minutes, and we'll talk about this. But that is the thing you have to remember. That is the number one thing to remember with Anthony Richardson. The dude hasn't played a ton. Okay, there's going to be some good spots, like the game against the Texans where the Colts scored 27 points and they're pushing the ball down the field and it's fun and it's exciting. And Alec Pierce has, 3 receptions for 130 yards. Like, there are going to be games like that. And then there are going to be games like the ones that we saw against the Packers. And this is why Jonathan Taylor is so important to relieving some of that pressure off of Anthony Richardson. And hopefully we continue to kind of see the game plan that we saw against the Bears. Run Jonathan Taylor, get Anthony Richardson into 3rd and 3, 2nd and 2, and let him take some shots down the field. I got off on a tangent there, but that's fine. That is something, though, that we have to remember when it comes to the Colts, right? Another 1-2 team. There's going to be ups. There's going to be downs. We knew this coming into the season. So I don't know why we're all surprised by it. Last 2 teams that are surprising 1-2, at least surprising to some of y'all. The Rams are 1-2, surprising to me, but they just have a ton of injuries. Both offensive tackles hurt. Okay, Puka Nakua's hurt. Cooper Kupp is on IR. Like, they're just incredibly banged up. They stole a game against the 49ers on Sunday, which was, I don't know if you saw it or not, just incredible. Just Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay with just a gutsy performance. They made the playoffs last year. It's an uphill battle for them to get back just because they're dealing with all of these injuries, right? So once they get healthy, though, they'll be fine. 49ers also 1-2. Same boat for them. Deebo Samuel's hurt. George Kittle's hurt. Christian McCaffrey hasn't played a snap all year. Trent Williams has been in and out of the lineup, right? Injuries have the capability of derailing every single season, right? While I was wrong on the Jaguars, cool. I was, right? I said that they were probably going to win the AFC South, and that's not going to happen. But I was dead on about the 49ers. I said that they'd have an injury-plagued season because they were incredibly healthy last year. They've had 5 deep playoff runs in the last 6 seasons. And when you look at their roster, they have the oldest roster in the league. They have more 30-year-olds on their roster than any other team in the NFL. And when you're old, because 30 is old in the NFL, and you've got a lot of wear and tear on your body, like the 49ers do, because they've been on these deep playoff runs over the past, 5 years, like, you're going to have injuries. And that is what the 49ers and the Rams, as a matter of fact, have both run into. They've just had terrible injury luck to start the season. If either one of them, 49ers or the Rams, if they can get healthy and stay healthy, then they definitely have the talent to be one of the better teams in the NFC. Right? So it's fascinating. This is why we play the games, right? Because no one knows what the heck is going to happen, right? Bengals are 0-3, 49ers are 1-2, the Cowboys are 1-2. I don't think people really necessarily had that on their bingo cards. The Colts being 1-2, I do think that that's something that people expected. Okay, the Probably going to start the year 1-3. But when we look at the Colts, we have to remember that their schedule lightens up further down the road. Okay, so Steelers this week, at the Jaguars in week 5. That'll be tough just because it's in Jacksonville, and the Colts obviously never win down there. But once again, if there's any time to do it, it's this year. And then they're at the Titans. That's a very winnable game. They get the Dolphins at home. Who knows if Tua will be back by then. That game's winnable. And then they get the Texans and the Vikings and the Bills and the Jets. And yeah, towards the end of the year, though, that's when their schedule lightens up. And hopefully by that point, Anthony Richardson will have figured some things out and he can actually run a good offense for the Colts. Speaking of Anthony Richardson, Zack Hicks is set to join me coming up next segment, 11 o'clock. We're going to talk Anthony Richardson. We're going to talk Jonathan Taylor, just the Colts as a whole. We'll look back on their win over the Chicago Bears, things they did well, things they didn't do well. And we'll also look ahead to their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts is set to join me here in about 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket, hour number 2 underway. Zack Hicks, Locked On Colts, joins me because as he does every Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Zack, how are you, man?
Doing pretty good, man. I mean, heck, better than what you were feeling last week, I guess, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I was getting poked and prodded at this time last week. Pulling up, dude.
Oh,
they took 30 vials of blood from me in like a 20-hour span. It was brutal.
Oh, God.
Yeah. But like you said, all better now. Colts got a win on Sunday. What'd you kind of think about the game overall? I know, obviously, the run defense, we'll talk about that. The offensive game plan, it was my favorite one we've seen from Steichen so far. But what did you kind of think about just the game as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think this will segue well into a conversation with Anthony Richardson, but I think it was a game where the other players on the roster finally held up their end of the bargain for their young quarterback who admittedly had a really bad game. Like, we didn't talk last week, and we would have, if we did talk last week, we would have been like, yeah, this was the worst game of Richardson's career against the Packers. Like, hopefully it gets better from here. And then it hit even another low against the Chicago Bears where, again, we'll talk more in detail about it in a second, but like, he just was simply not good enough in this game. And with better quarterback play, they probably win this game by 2 or 3 scores. That's just the reality of the situation. But it was finally a game where the other players on the roster, these guys who are on their second and third contracts, guys that are paid big money to do what they're supposed to be doing out there, really showed up and held up their end of the bargain for their young quarterback. So credit to Jonathan Taylor for looking like vintage Jonathan Taylor on a couple of those runs out there. Did some really great stuff. Credit to, I know this isn't a big paid guy, but like Alec Pierce has been playing great this year and had some great moments again in this one. The offensive line was fantastic. Shane Steichen, like you said, called his best game of the year. Looked very much like a last year Shane Steichen type game in everything he was doing. And then the defense, I mean, look, I picked against the Colts this past game on my podcast because how could I have any faith in the defense after Malik Willis was marching up and down the field at will against them?
Yeah.
And they came out and yes, Caleb Williams threw the ball for almost 400 yards, but like something that we mentioned on our show, on our podcast, and I think I might've mentioned on here as well. It's like, if you have a bad pass defense, but a great run defense, you can survive in the NFL. You can't survive with atrocious at both.
Yeah.
Like you have to pick one of those two to be pretty good at, and you'll be fine in the NFL. But what we saw the first 2 weeks is they were just getting killed through both, and especially on the ground. But just shoring up that run game, that run defense, and forcing Williams into these third and longs with how bad their offensive line is, and then taking advantage of those with sacks and pressures and interceptions. I mean, big shout out to Jalen Jones for those 2 picks. Outstanding play on both of those. So yeah, it was just a game where finally the defense showed up. The offensive line's been good all year, but they really showed up in this one. Jonathan Taylor really showed up. I mean, these other players around Richardson were able to carry him to a victory. And maybe this is something that he needs, where it's like, look, this isn't Florida under Dan Mullen, man. Like, you don't need to be Superman on every single play to try to get a win. Like, maybe sometimes the guys around you can propel you to victory, and it doesn't have to be all on your shoulders. Because look, in college, if he wasn't throwing for 400 yards and rushing for another 100, they probably weren't winning. With this Colts team, he just tossed 150 and 2 picks, and they won a game in the NFL. Like, maybe that's the wake up call he needed going forward to maybe calm down a little bit more. But we'll talk about that in a second. I'm just glad that these other guys were able to step up and get a win for their young quarterback in a game where he wasn't his best.
I'm with you. Joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. Yeah, he was terrible. People didn't like the first interception. I thought it got tipped and Doolin was coming open in the back of the end zone. It's the second interception that really bothered me, where Alec Pierce settles down. He's open, but he sails it, and it winds up in Jalen Johnson's arms. Pretty similar to the interception we saw Trevor Lawrence throw last night, where a guy's open, he just made an inaccurate throw. That was, I think, the play that bothered me the most. But I will say, I thought that the Colts offensive formula, like this is the best one that we've seen. Like, if like Anthony Richardson threw the ball 32 times against the Packers and Jonathan Taylor only had 12 carries. And I was like that just doesn't work with a quarterback who's barely played football, like just in general. And so I liked how they leaned a little bit more on Jonathan Taylor this week, just to take some of that pressure off of Anthony Richardson. And is this something that you think is going to kind of continue to happen? Do you think that this is kind of the version of the Colts offense that we're going to see going forward, where it's a little more Jonathan Taylor dependent?
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to the game flow. Like a big aspect of that Packers game, and again, maybe Steichen freaked out a little bit too much with the early deficit, but a big part of that Packers game was what it was by the end of the first quarter, the Colts offense had run 3 plays, and by the time they stepped on the field for their 4th play, they were down 10-0. And it's like you can still run the ball down 10-0 in the first quarter. Like it's not that big a deal, but down 2 scores already in the first quarter, and your defense just allowed 2 easy drives for points. It kind of gets you pressing a little bit. You start throwing the ball a little bit more, and then when you get to the second half and you're down 13-0 and you don't have anything going, you really start hitting that throw button. And so that might have been a little bit too much panicky. Maybe you should have run a little bit more, but I understand it with that game flow. This one was a more advantageous game flow to where, yeah, the Colts' first series, I believe they went 3-and-out again in this first series, this past game. But they weren't down 7-0. They weren't down 7-0 or 10-0 or 14-0 by the time they got the ball for their second series. So they were able to get back on the ground. They were able to still kind of work their offensive identity and not be in catch-up mode. So I think that's a big part of it going forward is like, if this defense can hold up their end of the bargain, and I'm not even saying they need to be great, like just be fine. Like don't be allowing teams to march up and down the field on you every single series. Then I think this offense can stay in rhythm and do like you said, like lean on Jonathan Taylor, lean on this ground game, maybe only have Richardson throw 20 to 25 times instead of it being 30, 35, 40, or whatever the heck Caleb Williams just threw in this past game. He was throwing the ball like 60 times against the Colts.
Yeah.
So I do think that's the right way that you want to have it though with this offense.
I completely agree. And you talk about how Caleb Williams I think he dropped back to pass, like 60 times, like you said. And it's like, look, like when the opposing team throws the ball that many times, like you're going to give up passing yards. Just talking about the defense, but the run defense was the best we've seen. I thought it was the best defensive performance we've seen from the Colts just in general on the year, which that's not saying much because they weren't very good against the Texans or the Packers. Once again, joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. So when I was in the hospital last week, I started drafting a letter to apologize to Nick Cross because you've heard me talk about this. Like we talked about it, like so many questions around Nick Cross. And I know that, the kind of the star of the defense this game was Jalen Jones, but just over the first 3 weeks, Nick Cross has been good. Like, have there been some blips here and there? Of course, because it's the NFL and offenses are good and they're going to score points, but he's been really impressive for me to start the year. What have you kind of thought about him and just kind of how he's performed so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I really said out of the safety next to Julian Blackmon this year, whoever it was going to be, was I was like, look, as long as they're making their tackles, like they're not missing tackles, I'm good. Like I can live with some issues in coverage because the Colts are going to have a lot of issues in coverage this year. And I feel like Cross has lived up to that. I mean, fairly meager expectation, but I feel like he lived up to it and even surpassed it in some ways. Yes, the coverage issues are there. Like there's been the pass interference, I believe he had last week. A couple other times that he was the guy back that got beat by Odunze. And yeah, like the goal line stuff is still like, we got to get the communication stuff down there, but he's been tackling well. He's been hitting hard, like coming downhill. They moved him back to strong safety this past game. And I thought that was a great fit for him. And then the second Jalen Jones interception, I was actually just watching that last night on the All 22 film to see what happened. The Bears were trying to do an out and up with Odunze to try to get him, free along the sideline. And the Colts were just in the typical cover 3 and Cross was down as the buzz defender, and he wasn't really supposed to carry that route vertically up the field, but he sensed that Odunze was breaking up the field and carried it just enough and got his hand in there and bounced it up to Jalen Jones with the interception. That's that's a high level difference maker play right there for him. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say he's been a superstar or even been like a Pro Bowl caliber player, but like we're 3 weeks into the season and we're saying, look, Cross at the worst has been solid. And I can take that. Like, give me that all year for this safety who's 22, and I'm very happy with that. So Nick Cross, yeah, so far, if we're, giving out game balls to defenders through these first 3 weeks, like he certainly gets one. He's been really playing some good football these last couple of weeks.
He has, joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. Why do you think, how much of the run defense improving this week was because of EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin versus, look, like obviously DeForest Buckner is he's a good run defender, but I'm very curious your thoughts on, was part of why the Colts run defense better because there were snaps where Grover Stewart and Raekwon Davis were on the field together, because those are kind of more run defending defensive tackles. So how much was it kind of a different combination of defensive tackles, and how much of it was Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed just playing better?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors to it. One is, look, the Bears' offensive line is dreadful.
Sure.
Like it is. Matt Pryor was out there at left guard or at right guard, and we know how that goes with him at right guard.
That's right.
So that's part of it. Like we do have to give, like I came on here the first 2 weeks being like, or the first week being like, yeah, credit to the Texans. We got to give credit to the Bears for helping us with this by putting Matt Pryor at right guard. But I do think, yes, like you mentioned, Raekwon Davis being out there playing some really good football, Grover Stewart looking like Grover Stewart all game was great. And the linebackers, I mean, look, Zaire and EJ Speed have been very open about how, this isn't a scheme thing. This isn't everybody else thing. Like, we got to play better, especially Zaire Franklin. He said how, he takes it personal, how much these teams have run on them the first 2 weeks and how he needs to be better. And credit to him, man, for backing those words up in this game. Zaire Franklin is a guy who definitely does not back down from a fight and does not back down from his own criticism and back down from really anything. And he got out there and played one of his best games of his career. In terms of run defense, man, he was all over the place. Even if he wasn't the guy making the tackle, he was lighting up a guard. He was working around a guard. He was making guards get out of their position, out of their run lanes that they needed to be in. And he was making just life hell for that Bears offense. So Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed had some really, really good moments in this game, really good bounce back weeks for them. And yeah, like you said, those defensive tackles, they really went to work in this game. I'm just happy to see the effort in run defense. I feel like a lot of run defense, like yes, like you can scheme as a part of it, like don't get me wrong, but a lot of it really is effort and tenacity and just finding the ball. And I'm just happy these guys were able to pop the offense a little bit, find the ball and get some runners to the ground for once, because gosh, those first 2 weeks was so painful to watch. So just seeing them actually playing hard, displacing the offensive line a little bit, pushing them back into the backfield and finishing plays was all I could really ask out of the run defense. Like, it doesn't need to be this dominant every week. Just show this effort every week and I'm good. Like, just don't allow 250 and we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. If you give up 250, then you wind up like the Cowboys and you lose to everybody.
Yeah. And it looked like we were going that way. So I'm glad they were able to bounce back.
Me too. Joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. I want to start to look ahead now to the Steelers, who are an interesting team, to say the least. I know they're 3-0, but I still don't feel like they're that good. Maybe that's just me still not believing in Justin Fields, but I feel like these two teams, the Colts and the Steelers, are incredibly similar, and they don't fully trust their quarterbacks who can be mistake prone. Like, we know what the Steelers are going to do. They're going to come out, they're going to try to run the football, and they're going to rely on what is the best defense in the NFL. What do you kind of think about this Colts matchup with the Steelers?
Oh man, it's a tough one for Richardson. I thought this Bears matchup was a really tough one for Richardson, and honestly, after watching the film, it really wasn't. But he just missed his throws. But I think the Steelers one is really tough because they are a team who they don't blitz at all, and Richardson is actually at his best when he's able to maneuver off the blitz a little bit, and he gets his process sped up by defenders and has less defenders sitting back in zone coverage. So that's kind of when he's at his best. And the Steelers are a team where they're just going to rush 4, maybe rush 5, but mostly rush 4. and they're going to let TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Cam Hayward just go to work against your offensive line. Now, luckily, the Colts have a really good offensive line that's playing some great football this year, so it should be a fantastic battle between those two. But it's not going to be like what we saw these first 3 weeks, where the Colts offensive line, by and large, has won in the passing game. Like, maybe a little bit in the Texans game, they were a little bit leaky, but for the most part, this Colts offensive line has been winning in pass protection. It's going to be a little bit closer to 50-50 this next game against the Steelers because TJ Watt is that good. Like, it doesn't matter how good your tackles are, TJ Watt's going to get his wins.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a different game in that aspect. The Steelers are going to sit back in zone coverage a lot and force Richardson to throw the ball into these tight zones. Ultimately, though, I think if the Colts want to win this game, it's going to be another one where it's like, you got to win ugly. You got to, like, maybe not as ugly as this past one because you just want to mitigate the mistakes a little bit. But the Steelers and Mike Tomlin, man, like, they're 3-0, and I'll tell you why they're 3-0, because it's just what Mike Tomlin is. Is they make you play ugly football with them, and they are the masters of ugly football. Like, they know ugly football like the back of their hand, and they will force you into a field goal off. Like, they will force you into a 15-12 game, a 9-6 game, whatever it's going to be, and they'll just outlast you because they have a good coach who understands that style of football. So ultimately, it really comes down to if the Colts can win on the ground like they did last year against the Steelers team, if they can stop the run game on the other side and stop the explosives from Fields and get the job done there. But yeah, I think it's a tough game for Richardson. I hope they simplify the passing game a little bit and lean on Taylor and lean on the run game like they did last year in this matchup. But we'll see. I mean, look, they're throwing the kitchen sink at Richardson. They're letting him sink and swim with it currently. So we'll see if that continues in this really tough matchup, because if they have him throwing the ball downfield as much as he has these past couple of weeks against the Steelers, it might lead to even more mistakes.
Joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. So something that I've been surprised by this year, and I'm really hoping that we start to see this week against Pittsburgh. You know, Shane Steichen had the quote in the offseason where he compared Anthony Richardson's running ability to Steph Curry's three-point shooting ability. And he's only averaging 6 carries a game. And I think so much of offense is rhythm, and rhythm just comes from positive things happening. Do you think there's a reason why we aren't seeing Anthony Richardson run the ball very much? And do you think there's a chance that we see a slight shift in that this week?
Yeah, so a couple of theories I have with it is, I mean, one being the Colts are calling a lot of plays where Richardson can keep it. I think teams are just very wary of Richardson running, which for good reason. I mean, he's averaging, he's got 18 carries this year, 15 of them, if you don't count the kneel downs from past week. So 15 carries this year, 6 of them have gone for explosive runs over 10 yards. So he's got like a 40% explosive run rate right now, which is absurd. He's got almost 100 or over 100 yards rushing this season on those carries. Like, he's been explosive when he's touched the ball in the run game. It's just he hasn't done that a lot. So teams are very wary of it on those give or not give type plays. But then you could also work in like more draw plays, more QB power type stuff. So why are we not seeing that? And I think part of it is, like I mentioned a second ago, they are kind of throwing like a real NFL passing game at him right now. And what I mean by that is, like, he's not getting the early Lamar Jackson treatment with Greg Roman. He's not getting the early Jalen Hurts treatment with Shane Steichen. Like, he's not getting that. He's not getting like what Cliff Kingsbury is doing with Jaden Daniels, where it's screen, 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 screen. Okay, occasional deep shot, screen, screen, screen. Like, he's not getting that kind of stuff. He's getting three level reads. He's getting high lows across the field. He's getting a lot of what Josh Allen got in his second and third year, a lot of what Trevor Lawrence got in his first year with Doug Peterson. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the wrong way to go about it. It's just, I think it's a style or a preference here that prioritizes Richardson's long-term growth over his current production and maybe getting like wins right now. Because the thing with Richardson, like, the runs are always going to be there with him. Even if he's not doing them right now, that's always something you have in your back pocket with him. But you don't really have the pure pocket passing ability right now. And you don't know if he'll ever will get there. So maybe, again, this is all theories because Shane Steichen is a closed book on a lot of things when it comes to talking to media.
Yes.
But maybe it's more so like we need to work on the pocket passer stuff right now before we get to year 3, 4, 5 with him. We really need to get him the reps in this stuff and seeing it and get those jitters out, because right now all of his misses are really not from his eyes being in the wrong place. It's because he sees an open receiver, freaks out, and just sails it. Like, it's not really anything mechanical. It's all mental with him. So if we keep giving him these passing reps, these true NFL read reps from reading the field, seeing the whole thing, and like, look, he's seeing the right guy to throw the ball to. It's just he's not used to NFL speed. He freaks out when he sees a guy open because I'm guessing he thinks the defender's closer than what they are, and he's just not completing the process of throwing it correctly, which is leading to sailing. So maybe if we keep giving him these reps and eventually he realizes what he can and can't be doing, this is going to be better for his long-term development. So once he gets to that spot as a passer, then we can go back to more of the run game stuff and really unleash everything that is Anthony Richardson. So I think to a degree it is kind of part of the process where it's like we are prioritizing his development right now rather than, dare I say, wins. I don't want to say it to the fan base, so I might get killed for that. But like I don't think they're necessarily going like, we don't care about winning, because you see it in the fourth quarters of these games, Richardson running over dudes and diving into end zones and stuff. But I think it more so from Steichen is like, this is something we need to do to get him where we need him to be. The running will be there. Like, and once we fully unleash this kid, and look, they're still doing it in bits and pieces, but unless something shows up to where they think this kid really can't work as a true NFL passer, and we have to lean on 15 runs a game plus RPO gimmicky stuff, then I don't think they're going to treat him that way, at least currently. But I'm with you. Like, if they wanted to win more games right now, do the gimmicky stuff, like do the early Jalen Hurts stuff, do the Greg Roman, Lamar Jackson stuff. But I think it is an idea for Steichen right now we need to develop him as this full-time passer while we can. And then if we have to go back to that stuff, we can, you know?
Yeah, joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. And I'm glad you bring up the development stuff because you're right. I do think that we're in this process of trying to bring Anthony Richardson along, but also trying to bridge the gap with winning. Like, it's not the easiest thing to do. And I think Colts fans have asked an incredibly fair question of how long do we give Anthony Richardson to develop before we move on at some point? So, like, look, he's barely played. Like, he played, 13 games at Florida. He's started 7 games in the NFL. He's only started and finished 4. So it's incredibly early. And I think that's the thing that everyone needs to remember. But how long do you give someone like Richardson before you move on and draft your next guy if he doesn't pan out?
Yeah, for me, as long as the flashes and progress are there, I think we really give it until the end of next season before we really look hard in the mirror and discuss what we have, Now, obviously, if his next 10, 12 starts or whatever look like what we've seen these last 2 weeks, then we can have a hard conversation and be like, all right, is he just getting worse at this point? Like, are the flashes going away? But as long as he's still flashing and he's starting to minimize the mistakes, you really got to give it until at least the end of next season before you really start considering much. And even then, as long as he's still flashing, you owe it to look, you drafted him 4th overall and gave him a coach that is best suited to develop him for the long term. It's not something that's going to happen on day one. I mean, they took a 21-year-old quarterback with 13 starts in his career with a career completion percentage of 52% of where it was at college, 55%, whatever it was. It wasn't going to be this perfect thing from day one. Some quarterbacks come out the gate and they look like studs. Some of them look like CJ Stroud. Some of them look like Justin Herbert or Baker Mayfield his first year, or even Jaden Daniels these last couple games. He's looked really good. But others take some time. Others are like Josh Allen. Others are like, it took Lamar Jackson after his rookie season and a little bit into his second year. He was great second year, but it took him some time. Jalen Hurts, it took him almost 2 years. Drew Brees, he had to go to a whole different situation.
Yeah.
It took him 3 years, 4 years, and then a new shoulder. Matthew Stafford took him 3 years, because his shoulder kept falling off too. It takes time, for some of these quarterbacks. And, you see these old heads, I say old heads, endearingly here, because these are the guys I watched growing up, but Kurt Warner coming on here being like, oh, I'm in pain watching these young quarterbacks, or Tom Brady being like, quarterback play is not what it is because of this, this, and this. It's like, it's because a lot of these guys just don't get the time and they don't get the reps out there to figure themselves out. Look around the league right now. Who are the quarterbacks who have been the most productive to start this season? Sam Darnold, Derek Carr on his second team in late 20s right now, former second round pick. Sam Darnold, again, a guy everyone gave up on multiple times.
Yeah.
You look
Geno
at Justin
Smith.
Fields is 3-0. Yeah, it's like, I'm not saying these guys are all saviors right now. They're all living up to their first round billing, but like, maybe these guys can all kind of play a little bit. That's why they were taken high. And you just got to give them the time and the confidence to succeed. Like, I'm not guaranteeing that Anthony Richardson's going to work out. What I can tell you guys who are listening to this is, when I'm watching him, I'm seeing a smart young passer with all the talent in the world who knows where the ball needs to go. And guys are open. Like, I'm giving Shane Steichen credit too for that. It's just, he needs to calm down. He needs to figure out NFL speed. He needs to relax. Once he gets on a good CBD pill or something, maybe he'll be great, whatever it's going to be with that. But like, once he sees more field, like, I feel very confident, because like, this isn't a Kenny Pickett or a Bryce Young type thing where he's going into a shell and like just terrified to throw the ball, and like, you don't know what he's seeing out there. He's seeing the open guy. I mean, look at all of his interceptions this year. The first one to Granson, threw it to an open receiver. The receiver fell down. The Pittman one against the Packers, just sailed it over an open, or not the Pittman one, the Pierce one, I guess it was on that one. Sailed it over Pierce's head. Pittman this past week sailed over his head. Maybe the second one against the Packers where he tried to move a defender with his eyes and the defender didn't move the way he expected. But like, these are all like, he sees where the ball needs to go. He's just missing the throws. And maybe that's who he's going to be. But I'm always willing to bet on a quarterback who has the mind, has the eyes, has the talent, and it's just needs to get there mentally. And from everything we've seen from him, from interviews to how he talks to where he holds himself accountable and stuff, I believe in him. I believe in him getting there. So again, it's concerning these last 2 weeks. I understand people being down on what we've seen these last 2 weeks because it's not acceptable play going forward. Obviously, he knows that. We all know that. But I'm telling you, man, I think he's going to get there. I see enough in terms of everything besides the jitters that he's getting when he sees an open receiver to be confident. It's just, he's got to calm down, man. And once he calms down, I think he'll be a good quarterback for the Colts.
I hope you're right. Joined by Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. Last thing, and I'll let you go. I really just kind of want your thoughts on what I'm about to say. I think, look, no one likes to be patient. That's just the reality of it. When you take a guy like Anthony Richardson, patience is required. It's only been 3 games. Like, I think that's the biggest thing to remember here. It's been 3 games. He started and finished only 4 games in his career. And look, I don't know if he's going to be good or not. I just think that we don't know yet. That's really kind of where I sit. And I think that for Colts fans, especially, this is hard because the last 2 times that they drafted a quarterback incredibly high, it was Peyton Manning, who was awesome in year 2. And obviously, he's one of the best quarterbacks ever. And the other guy was Andrew Luck, who showed up and was immediately awesome, right? And, the 5 complete years that he played, they won 10 games in every single one of them, except for one. And the one year they didn't, he went, 8-7 or whatever. So, like, this is just a different experience for Colts fans that they haven't had to go through in a really, really long time. And I still think that this experience greatly beats the experience of going to Joe Flacco and continuing this revolving door of just like, because seriously, 12 months ago, Colts fans are complaining to me like, we just have this revolving door quarterback. There's no stability. Why won't Chris Ballard draft a quarterback? Like that was the complaint. And now that he has, we're having to go through these young quarterback growing pains, which isn't fun at all. And now we're getting complaints about this. That's just the reality of being a sports fan, though. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, like, look, I get it, guys. You all have been graced with, if you even go back to the Baltimore days, like the Colts franchise has drafted the 3 most can't miss quarterback prospects in the history of the sport. Now, one of them didn't want to play for him, so they had to trade him to the Broncos, John Elway back in the day. But you go to Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, like, these were the most can't miss quarterback prospects in the history of football. Like, you really can, like, there's no argument really with that. They were the most clear-cut number one picks ever. And even they took some time, but like they're great. Like Peyton Manning's an all-time great. Andrew Luck, fantastic quarterback when he played. John Elway, obviously an all-time great, but for a different team.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different experience. But like you said, man, we were begging for years, like just rip the band. Like I remember it was getting so bad with us in terms of just get a young quarterback in here that we were like
Sam Ehlinger.
Whatever.
People wanted Sam Ehlinger. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like whatever. Take Desmond Ridder in like round 2 or 3 and just. If it works, it works. You're like, whatever. Take Malik Willis in round 2, which maybe that would have worked now with how he's playing. But, it's like, it was kind of at the point where it's like, just take find your young quarterback you like, and I'll give you a couple years. And I think the hard part of this, honestly, for Colts fans is the GM has been here so long.
Yep.
Like,
you're
that's
exactly right.
And I agree. I agree. That makes it harder. It makes it more annoying, for sure. The GM has been here so long, because if the GM comes in with Shane Steichen, I think we're a little bit more calm about all this. It's more like, okay, everyone's young with this team right now. It doesn't really matter that much. But because Ballard's been here for so long, it makes it a different conversation.
Yeah.
But aside from the whole Ballard aspect, which I do think makes it the hardest, this is just kind of natural life. And it's better than the alternative. Like the alternative is forever being in that 2019 Colts to 2022 Colts, or 2023 Colts. We can actually add in there with the Gardner Minshew part of it. It's forever just grabbing a new quarterback off the street, come in here. They'll be okay-ish, I guess. Like maybe you'll get the highs of a Phillip Rivers season, but for the most part, not going to be very good.
Yep.
You'll be like the
fringe
same
wild
star right
card
now.
team.
Like, yeah, like, and it's just like, I guess it's more watchable during that season, but like after the year, you're like,
now what?
Where are we going with this? Yeah, where are we going? And that's the thing. Like, yes, I saw a couple people mention Flacco, but maybe my mute button just works really well on Twitter, so I haven't seen it very often. But it's like, you can't see, like, say Flacco gets you to, we'll go the craziest route possible. Say Flacco comes in, starts for the Colts right now. They go on this insane winning streak and get the 1 seed in the AFC and get to the AFC Championship game and lose. And it's like, wow, this was the greatest. Flacco is Hall of Fame bound and stuff. Where's that get you a year from now, 2 years from now? Like, Flacco's going to be retired here in a minute. Like, and by and large, that's the extreme version of Flacco. Flacco's had like 2 good years his entire career.
Yeah.
I like Joe Flacco. Don't get me wrong, but like, come on. We're not talking about prime Peyton Manning sitting behind Anthony Richardson right now. We're talking about goofy, washed-up Joe Flacco who will come out here and chuck 450, 4 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions a game, which will be fun, but like a different kind of fun. So yeah, it's kind of like you can't. It's like maybe you asked for something you weren't ready for. Like you can't keep asking for the young quarterback and then
not
be in pain every time the young pain every time the young quarterback isn't perfect. And it's like, no, this is how the young quarterback thing works. When you do the veteran quarterback thing, you can complain like this about, Jacoby Brissett misses a pass, get him out of there, go to Sam Ehlinger, you can go to these guys. But like with a young quarterback, no, you are legit invested in this kid. Like you need to give this process a good 3-4 years, whatever it's going to be. And there's extenuating circumstances. Maybe they're like a Bryce Young and it's like, this is just not a functional quarterback. But like, as long as they're showing some flashes and have some talent out there and stuff, like you give this 3-4 years and then you evaluate after that. And if you want to move on and start over again, cool, take another swing. Or I guess you wouldn't because you'd be fired if you're the GM. But like typically, I don't know with this one.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, seriously.
But I don't know, man. Like you just commit to it. Like you really commit to the young quarterback. I fully believe the Colts are committed to Richardson in this development. Like I know Kirk Herbstreit said it in the preseason, which was really goofy, but like I don't think there's even a remote thought in anybody's mind in the organization to ever move off with Richardson this season.
Yep.
I mean, unless again it gets to the Bryce Young situation where like this is just not functional at this point. So it's like you just got to stick with the bumps in the road. Hopefully the bumps smooth out throughout the year, but if they don't, then look, everyone who's saying that Ballard should have been fired the last couple of years will probably get their wish. They'll probably get Steichen fired too, probably get Richardson fired. Like, all these guys will be gone in the next 2 years if it doesn't work out. So for now, I think we just sit here through the bumps and the bruises and hope for the best and hope that, again, like, this kid can figure it out, because it's much more fun for him to figure it out than it is for him to not.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Zach. I blew through a break. I gotta go. Thanks for your time, man. You were great as always, man.
Yeah, you have a good one, bud.
See ya. That is Zack Hicks of Locked On Colts. Check him out on Twitter at Zack Hicks, followed by the number 2. Smart guy, does a ton of stuff on the Colts. When we come back here in 3 minutes, I've got Top 10 Tuesday, the 10 best teams in the NFL coming your way.
Happy Halloween weekend.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you're having a nice Tuesday. Check out the show on YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket. Download that Indy Sports Ticket app so you can stream the show on the go and listen to the Dan Dockett Show as well, following my show from noon to 3. It is Tuesday, which means it's Top 10 Tuesday. Ranking the 10 best teams in the NFL. This is what we do all football season long. And then when we get into the offseason, Top 10 Tuesday takes on a slightly different meaning, and we rank other things. But it's the NFL season, so we're ranking the NFL teams. Let's start at the top. Number 10, the 10th best team in the NFL, the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers 2-1 on the season. I like Justin Herbert. I like Coach Harbaugh. Okay, I like the physicality that he's brought to that team, but they need more weapons. I think that was pretty evident in their loss on Sunday to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey, just not quite enough to score points against the best defense in the NFL, but they're going to be capable of running the football against most teams. They have a good, stout defense, right, that is much improved since Brandon Staley's departure. And look, they're going to win a lot of games, 21-17, because they can run the football, they play good defense, and they have a guy in Justin Herbert who's capable of making things happen on third downs. Number 9, the Steelers. The best unit in football is their defense. Okay, as long as they don't turn the ball over, they're going to win a lot of games against bad and average teams. Okay, when they play the better teams, though, I talked about this earlier, I have concerns about their ability to score the football enough to beat some of the better teams in the NFL, like the Chiefs and the Bills, that are going to score against their defense. Number 8, the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud continues to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. I know they got mollywopped on Sunday by the Vikings 34-7, but look, I like CJ Stroud. He's a good quarterback. DeMeco Ryans is a good coach. They still seem like they're one of the better teams in the NFL. I just think we're going to see people start to peel back off of them after they just got absolutely dominated by a really good Minnesota Vikings team. Number 7, the Ravens. I know they're 1-2, but I refuse to have my rankings just be a reflection of record. I know they're 1-2, but it's Lamar Jackson. The offense is incredibly high-powered. They can run the football against anyone because of Lamar and Derrick Henry, and the Justice Hill kid is awesome as well. The defense is making strides in the right direction. I know they almost fell apart at the end of that Dallas game, but for the first 3 quarters, I mean, they dominated. Okay. And look, they're also Isaiah Likely getting a foot in bounds away from maybe being 2-1 with the win over the Chiefs and everyone going crazy about them. They are imperfect, but unlike the Bengals, who are also imperfect, Lamar Jackson is good enough to mask these imperfections with his ability to run the football and to throw the ball from the pocket. He's a much improved pocket passer. What a surprise. Quarterbacks get better the longer they're in the NFL. Number 6, I've got the Packers. 2-1. They've won 2 games with Malik Willis at quarterback. Matt LaFleur putting on an absolute coaching clinic. They're running the football, only asking Malik Willis to do the easy things. I don't care that these 2 wins came over the Colts and the Titans. They've just been dominant up front. They have a great defense. Okay, they're physical, they're fast, they get after the passer, and they've got multiple good corners. When Jordan Love comes back, this Packers team is only going to get better. I've got the Packers sitting there as the 6th best team in the NFL. Number 5, the Seattle Seahawks. That defense is nasty. They have the 2nd best defense in the NFL. They're leading the league in yards per play allowed at only 3.9. Geno Smith has been solid at the quarterback position. They're running the football. Mike McDonald has brought that Baltimore Ravens defensive magic with him to Seattle. They get after the passer. They've got great corners, great linebackers, physical football team. Seahawks at 5. They're a good, solid, talented football team. Number 4, the Detroit Lions. They lost a weird game to the Buccaneers 2 weeks ago, but I think they're one of the more complete teams in the NFL. They have a pass rush. I like their linebackers. Their secondary is much improved from last year. Jared Goff has gotten off to a bit of a slow start, but they're still putting up points. They're still running the football with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, they are just a complete, well-rounded team, and we're going to continue to see that. That Buccaneers loss was a little weird. I don't think we're going to see them continue to do that. Dan Campbell made a slight coaching mistake in that game. I don't think he'll make that mistake again, and they'll continue to win games as the year progresses. The Lions are the 4th best team in the NFL, but they are not the best team in their division. The best team in that division, surprisingly, are the Minnesota Vikings. They have been, or played like, the 2nd most complete team in the NFL. People wrote Sam Darnold off, rightfully so. Kevin O'Connell has come in and really kind of resurrected his career. Sam Darnold leading the league in touchdown passes with 8. He's only thrown 2 picks. Justin Jefferson is still Justin Jefferson. They went out, they added Aaron Jones, put him in the backfield, former Green Bay Packers running back. So they've got a good guy behind Sam Darnold for when they need to run the football. The offensive line is protecting. And then defensively, they have one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL in Brian Flores. Okay? Like, I know there's some drama around him, but the dude knows how to coach the defensive side of the football. Okay? They added some defensive pieces in the offseason, but they look like one of the best teams in the NFL through 3 weeks. They're scoring points. They're not giving up points. They look incredibly complete. Through 3 weeks, can Sam Darnold keep this up? I don't know. But as of right now, that's one of the better teams in the NFL. Number 2, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. 3-0, haven't played a good game yet, but they do what championship teams do. They just continue to find ways to win. Their defense continues to be nasty. Okay. Great defensive coordinator, Chris Jones. Nick Bolton's been awesome. The secondary has been good. Okay, the defense is once again very similar to last year. A large part of why they're winning. Offensively, they are better than they were last year, even though we haven't seen them play a good game yet. Rashee Rice is much improved. Travis Kelce is going to get involved at some point. He looks a little out of shape. When he gets into shape, he'll be better than what he is now. They're still trying to figure out the Xavier Worthy piece. I know that Isaiah Pacheco got hurt. That's concerning. He's going to be out for a fairly decent amount of time, having surgery on that ankle. But they threw the ball a lot more against Atlanta because Pacheco's hurt. And I don't know. I feel like giving the football to Patrick Mahomes more and allowing him to make more decisions isn't exactly a bad idea. So they may be better because of Pacheco's injury. That's a galaxy brain take that I won't get into, but it is something that I'll be monitoring. Chiefs are currently the second best team in the NFL. The best team in the NFL, though, number one, the Buffalo Bills. 3-0, and for the first time in Josh Allen's career, the Bills are not overly dependent on him. Years past, it felt like Josh Allen had to do everything for the Bills. He had to throw for 300 yards, he had to run for 80, and he had to account for 5 touchdowns for them to have any sort of chance to win. And that just isn't the case. James Cook has emerged as one of the better running backs in the NFL. He can catch it out of the backfield. He can pass protect. Obviously, he's a great runner of the football. And Joe Brady, new Bills offensive coordinator and play caller, is really leaning on him and taking some of this pressure off of Josh Allen. Keon Coleman is slowly coming along. Khalil Shakir has really emerged as their best receiver. They're starting to get the tight ends involved. Like, this Bills team is legit, and they have been the best and most complete team in the NFL. They've got some injuries on the defensive side of the ball, but great defensive head coach. They've been great on that side of the ball. Just crushed the Jags last night. 47-10 or 41-10, whatever it was. Just blew them out of the building. I don't think anybody watched the second half of that game, but they have been the best team in the NFL so far. Some of the injuries on defense are concerning, but they haven't proved to be a hindrance just yet. Some of the teams that I left off, let me very quickly, address those things. I left the Eagles off because I don't trust Nick Sirianni. I left the Saints off. I don't care that they hung a bunch of points on 2 bad teams. Okay. The Cowboys have probably the worst defense in the NFL, and they scored 40 points against the Panthers. Congratulations. That doesn't impress me. As soon as they played an average team in the Eagles, they looked average. Simple as that. No Buccaneers because I don't trust Baker Mayfield as much as I trust the other quarterbacks on this list. With that being said, I trust him more than Justin Fields, but I trust that Steelers defense more than both. No Jets because I just want to see a little bit more. Okay, like I don't trust their defense entirely yet. Robert Saleh is pretty dependent on having 4 guys that can get after the quarterback. That way he can run the defense that he wants. Haven't really seen that consistently so far throughout the season, so want to see that before I put the Jets in the top 10. So one more time for you, top 10 Tuesday. Here are the 10 best teams in the NFL. The Chargers at 10, Steelers at 9, Texans at 8, Ravens at 7, Packers at 6, Seahawks at 5, Lions at 4, Vikings 3, Chiefs at 2, and the Bills are currently the best team in the NFL. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I've got thoughts on the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, and his great start to the season.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Jonathan Taylor, need another big performance from him coming up this week against the Steelers. Okay, we've seen Anthony Richardson these last couple weeks. It hasn't been pretty. Okay, young quarterback lumps. Bears, pretty good defense. He struggled against the Packers, who appear to also have a pretty good defense based off of the small sample size we've seen from them in these last 3 weeks. And then, the Colts are getting ready to face the best defense in the NFL in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's going to be a rough one for Anthony Richardson. I think we all know that. Colts' best chance of being able to, I believe that they're at home this week playing against the Steelers, but their best chance to win this game is another game where they're at home. Their best chance to win this game is another game where Jonathan Taylor has 25 to 30 touches, runs the ball incredibly well, 100 rushing yards, maybe makes a couple big plays in the passing game. That is what they need more than anything else, because Anthony Richardson is going to turn the football over against the Steelers. Like, it is undoubtedly going to happen. They have got to figure out ways to relieve pressure off of him, and the best way to do that is with Jonathan Taylor in the run game. Wouldn't mind seeing them incorporate some more screens just to give him easy things to do. I'd like to see them run, Anthony Richardson a little bit more as well, because that's something that we all know that he's more than capable of doing at a high level. So hopefully we see more of that. Hopefully we see more Jonathan Taylor. Hopefully this Colts defense continues to stuff the run, because the Steelers, look, I don't care that they're 3-0. I really don't. I have no faith in Justin Fields to sit back in the pocket and beat the Colts with his arm. So that run defense is going to have to continue for them to have any sort of chance at beating the Steelers on Sunday at Lucas Oil. That's going to do it for the real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen. Head over to YouTube, subscribe, Indy Sports Ticket. Join the live stream tomorrow for the show. I'm on tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show is set to come your way here in about 5 minutes.